Ladies and gentlemen, it's very nice to be with you today. I am passionate about education. The child, niece and grandchild of state school teachers and head teachers, state school educated myself, I know that education has more power than any other institution to redress inequality of opportunity. Only the family, particularly the quality of parenting, does more to improve young people's life chances. And surveying the national scene, I can see that 1 in 3 English pupils have fewer than 5 GCSE passes when they leave at 16. I can see that there are numbers of schools where no students achieve this. And I can see that in Britain we are far short of the best performing nations such as Singapore, Denmark and Finland, and behind much poorer countries such as Vietnam, Poland and Estonia. As a former governor of a multicultural Bolton academy in a very socially deprived area of Bolton, and now as a trustee of an alternative provision MAT, I know how hard state school colleagues have to work with insufficient resources and a society which undervalues learning and teachers. And all the same time, I recognise that we have a disproportionately large share of the finest schools in the world, because independent schools are a magnet for parents from throughout the universe. The inequality is such that the top 10% in our schools are 9 years ahead of the bottom 10% in science, and 8 years ahead in maths. And I know that the poor suffer disproportionately from this situation. And that is something that we desperately need to eradicate. The independent sector welcomes any debate about how we can be part of the solution. We're already active in this area through bursary schemes and partnership work, but we know we can and must keep doing more. We have immense privilege in the independent sector, but our privilege is not in terms of wealth. Our privilege is that we have the freedom to choose our own style, our own priorities, our curriculum, our pedagogical methods, our examinations, our staff's pay and conditions, the hours of work and the length of the school year. We have none of the accountability measures which Ofsted imposes. If we think it's in the best interest of the children before us to do music, art or technology at the heart of the curriculum, we don't have to worry about what bucket these subjects are in and whether enough of our children are doing EBAC subjects. And those of us which are charities take very seriously the fulfilment of our charitable aims. Let me talk from personal experience. Philip and I both work for the Bolton School Foundation, one in charge of the girls' division and one in charge of the boys' division. 1 in 5 of our children is on a bursary. We spend £2.5 million a year on bursaries, and our aim, which is not at all unrealistic, is to get to 1 in 3 before the end of the next decade. Our fees are under 12k. We realise that's a lot of money, and we do everything we can to keep them down. And the difference between our fee of 12k and what we would get in the state sector, which would be something like 6.5k, is because some of that money goes to bursary provision, so our own parents subsidise our bursary students, because we pay our staff higher wages than in the state sector, and they have smaller contact time. We have smaller classes. We don't restrict the curriculum in any way. We have to spend on marketing and on donor relations because we need to get in full fee payers, and we need to encourage our alumni to give for our bursaries. And of course we're responsible for our own capital expenditure. And finally, we pay for school lunches because we wouldn't want any child on a bursary or otherwise to feel that they couldn't be properly fed at lunchtimes. And in our school, 1/3 of our population comes from a BAME background, which is exactly mirroring the population in Bolton. So what would happen to my school if any of the 6 proposals you've heard about tonight were affected? Well, first of all, you heard about the levy of 20% VAT or 25% on fees. Now, we know that it's difficult for our full fee paying parents to find the money, so we do everything we can to keep fees as low as possible. We think we would survive that sort of levy, but we would lose pupils and we'd have to reduce our staffing costs to do so. Unlike us, many small schools would go under. The chair of the prep school organisation says that 100 schools would close and 22,000 children would need to be rehoused. At a time when some areas are so strapped for places that the local authority is asking independent schools to house state-funded children at their cost, how does that make sense? Don't we care that children and families would bear the brunt of these changes? Baines Cutler have said that pupil drop-up across the sector would be 135,000 pupils within a 5-year period.
2 minutes.
That's an awful lot of people's lives disrupted. And the policy, according to, is to raise 1.8 to 2.22 million. But that has no sense about the fall that would happen in pupil numbers, which means nothing like that percentage would be earned. And once that equilibrium had been removed, where would we be in Bolton? Our school would be smaller and the pupils in it would be wealthier. The squeezed middle would have gone and local state schools would be forced into more prefabs as their numbers increased and the local economy would take a dip as one of the town's principal employers would go under. And if we were to take the final option of full nationalisation, it is a breach of human rights legislation that parents should not have the ability to choose their children's education. If the government passed such legislation and ran a cart and horses through such a fundamental right, they would then find themselves compensating private owners of property for their assets. Staff in independent schools often have better pay than state school counterparts, so no doubt they would be too paid and their terms and conditions would be maintained by the state sector. So in Bolton, if you worked at my school, you'd be getting a better salary and better conditions than if you worked at the comprehensive next door. And the idea that you might have a school in which the year 7 were not paying fees and the rest of the school were paying fees, as outlined in these proposals, would be far too difficult to manage. Your older staff, the ones we've recently been reported as wanting to keep in education and who do stay on it in private schools because the burden of work is less, would leave as soon as they could. Your young staff would go abroad and heads like me would probably have nervous breakdowns trying to marry the two systems up. But let's forget the staff, let's think of how parents would respond if independent schools became state. We'd have the same situation as in every area where there's a popular school. Selection by mortgage. VL1 currently has an average house price of £120,000. It would become a property hotspot. I'd be laughing because I live there. But the children who would suffer would be those whose families could not afford those sky-high prices to move into the catchment area, the ones who currently attend on a bursary. It's fitting because it seems to me that in everything that is being discussed here, children are the least of everyone's concerns. They are being drowned out and hung out to dry in the interests of ideology.